Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's virtual candidates forum featuring the two candidates for Kittitas County Sheriff, Clay Myers and Bart Olson. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our candidates for making the time tonight. This forum is sponsored by the Kittitas County Chamber of Commerce. I'm the moderator, Steve DuPont. The rules are this. We're going to start out with 2-minute opening statements from the candidates. And then I have a series of questions that have been submitted by chamber members as well as written by us. And each question will be posed to both of the candidates. They'll have 2 minutes to answer each question. There'll be a 30-second rebuttal option, and then we'll wrap up with 90-second closing statements. Gemma from the chamber will be keeping time for each candidate, and Emily will be filtering additional questions from the Facebook and Zoom comments. So we might be able to get some additional questions in the mix as we go. The candidates have not seen the prepared questions we have. And lastly, we just ask that everybody be courteous and respectful. So with that, we are gonna get started. Prior to starting the debate, we did a coin, flipped a coin, and Sheriff Myers is gonna begin first with his opening statement. Mr. Myers?
Thank you, and good evening, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting this event and supporting our democratic process. We appreciate that. Let's see, I came to Kittitas County fresh out of the Army where I served as an airborne ranger. I met my wife, started work with the Sheriff's Office, and we raised our family. That was 35 years ago, married 32 years, 3 daughters. We raised our daughters to not just live in the community, but to be part of the community. We did this by involving them in projects and processes around the community, taking them to Mexico to build houses in impoverished areas, volunteering for things in the community, whether it's at the animal shelter, taking them with us and having them help us build handicap ramps for people in need. And just getting them involved, because that's how a community is supposed to work. With respect to public safety, done the same thing with our deputies. One of the first things I did after being appointed as sheriff here was to start the Community Connects program. This is a program where our deputies, when they're not actively involved in an investigation or an enforcement action or search and rescue, they're connecting personally one-on-one with members of the community, with businesses. That helps to establish a direct link. It also helps the community have somebody, puts a face on those names, and they share information. We find out what's happening in the different parts of the county. I'll continue to do that as your sheriff. Now I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Mr. Olson, your opening statement, please.
Thank you. So I live in the Thorpe area with my wife, Brenda. We just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. Our daughter, Madeline, was born and raised in Kittitas County. And we all love this county. We all have done various different community projects helping out our community. So I just retired from the Washington State Patrol after 25 years. And I was approached in the last couple of years to look at this job of Kittitas County Sheriff, and then I was encouraged to run by many good citizens. So my start for law enforcement came when I was going to Central Washington University, and I was obtaining my law and justice degree. And a friend of mine who was a sheriff's deputy encouraged me to join the Sheriff Reserves. So I joined the Sheriff Reserves, was a reserve deputy for a year and a half. And then while attending Central, I was doing that. And then I worked in the Kittitas County Jail. Then the State Patrol was starting to hire again in 1995. And I got hired by them, and the State Patrol allowed that option of a 25-year career, and then the option to retire after 25, and then continue to give back to the community. So after being encouraged by many good citizens in this county, law enforcement leaders, the former sheriff, I decided that I was going to run, and so I've been developing myself throughout my career to do this. I retired as a sergeant with the State Patrol here in Ellensburg. I was a sergeant for 7 years, and I look forward to continuing law enforcement and getting back to this community. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. What we're going to do from here on out is alternate who answers the question first. And since Mr. Myers gave his opening statement first, Mr. Olson, you'll get the first question. What do you see as the biggest law enforcement issue that our county faces, and what do you propose we should do about it?
Well, the biggest law enforcement challenge that we face, I think, well, there's multiple issues. I think the issue that we're going to face over the coming years is the growth of our county, and the people, especially since COVID, people are wanting to flock out of the major cities, and they want to have a small community like ours to come to. So I think the growth of the amount of people coming here and how many people have come here to recreate is going to create those problems for the sheriff's department. So some of the things that we could do to combat that is I want to get back to proactive police patrols. I want to combat the drugs that are coming into our community. That is something that many citizens have talked to me about, and something that I'm passionate about doing. Just looking over the last couple of years, we've had multiple deaths, drug-related deaths and alcohol-related deaths in this county. And starting in 2017, there's 26 deaths due to drugs and alcohol. 2018, it was 7. And then in 2019, it was 17. Looking at the stats that the sheriff's put out last year, there was only 1 delivery of drugs related arrest. And to me, that's unacceptable. We need to be proactive going after these people. And all the crimes that are associated with drugs are burglaries, thefts, robberies, assaults, weapon violations. And those are things that I think are important that we need to combat, and something that I look forward to doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Myers, the same question. What's the top law enforcement issue our county faces, and what would you like to do about it?
Well, it's a tough one because drugs is certainly an issue here. It's an issue across our country. And I think that it ties into so many others. The growth in our county is significant. That impacts our infrastructure, and we have a good program in addressing that in the works now. With respect to drugs, one of the things that I've seen in our county is, the first step is identifying what type of a drug problem do we have. And the type of drug problem we have here is, we don't have drug trafficking organizations set up in our county. We have what's kind of characterized as a recreational and retail use. It means that the drug sales in our county are driven by the demand. The drug use folds over into other criminal activity, and it folds over into mental health, and it folds over into homelessness. And all of these things put a draw on all of our resources. And one of the things that we've learned going forward is that if we don't address the desire to use drugs, to illegally use drugs, we're not gaining ground. Ever since the war on drugs began back in the 70s, the focus has been shutting off the supply, making arrests, and thinking that that's going to have the major impact. And what we found is it really doesn't. What we've done is we filled our jails and prisons up with the wrong people. My focus in addressing this, which is already underway, is establishing the programs in the jail to deal with the mental illness and the addiction, working with our mental health providers, working with our community, working with our schools, so that we get a better quality of life and we reduce the desire to use drugs, and we come up with alternatives. Just life skills, helping work with life skills. Those people committing crimes, violent crimes associated with drugs, yeah, we drop the hammer on them. We have to do something to combat that, but we really, really want to focus on reducing the need and the desire.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Olson raised his hand, so 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So I agree that we didn't need to have programs in the jails and with our kids to get them away from the desire to have drugs. But we also still need to combat the people who are bringing the drugs to our community. And there's a lot. And so we need to be proactive about that. That's how we save lives. All these deaths I just recently talked about, all those family members, and they have people that care about them, love them. And as a sheriff, I want to save, if it's just one life, that's what I want to do.
Okay. Moving on to our next question. Sheriff Myers, you're going to get this one first, more of an administrative question. If you were have the luxury of an increased budget for the sheriff's office, where do you think the greatest need is for funding enhancements?
Well, search and rescue, patrol operations, the jail, all of those require a tremendous amount of money. Putting more deputies on the road, manpower allocation, technology. Right now, I think that technology is one of our biggest assets. I'd like to see a little more emphasis there. I think that we have a pretty good handle with respect to jail capacity right now. We have a 213 bed facility. We were able to actually generate revenue by renting out some of those beds to other jurisdictions. It costs about $160,000 to put a deputy out on the road. So one of the things where we sometimes get a little bit hemmed up is that if we have multiple things occurring at one time, a water rescue, a search and rescue, and a criminal event or disaster, it can put a pretty big strain on us. So I'd say emergency management and probably putting some more deputies and programs out there. I think that our staffing and our jail setup is pretty good. We already have budgeted and gotten some approval for our programs. We're doing some revamping with respect to the actual infrastructure within the facility. As we speak, we're upgrading the technology and the camera systems. Those things are kind of ongoing. So really, if you just want to give me my own budget and the sky's the limit, I would invest in technology and personnel.
Okay, great. Same question to you, Mr. Olson. If you had a larger budget, what would be your funding priorities for the department?
I agree that having more deputies out patrolling and solving crimes is always going to be good. I'm about covering the county and making sure everything's covered. But with that being said, I think we could actually take what we have currently and we could use the resources better and better manage them as far as getting back to that proactive law enforcement, which might prevent other crimes and free up that time that officers are spent investigating stuff. They might be able to prevent it by being proactive. I'm glad Sheriff Myers said, renting out the jail space. That's something that I've said from the beginning. I think it's a 208 bed facility. We're currently maybe between 71, averaging about 109 inmates. And we need to maximize that facility as much as possible. So renting out that space and taking those extra resources to build on technology, more UAVs, unmanned area vehicles for search and rescue, unmanned area vehicles for suspect searching, using the technology to increase the computers in the car. So those are the budget things that I'd like to see, and just make our officers in the field as efficient as they possibly can be, saving the taxpayers money at any cost and just making them super efficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the follow-up question to this is going to be the opposite scenario. Let's say the county commissioners give you a smaller budget. How would you manage through that? Mr. Olson, you're first.
Thank you. So I think the importance of managing a budget is going to be where can we trim those costs, and that's always going to be on the forefront of my mind anyway. And just because I'm given a budget doesn't mean I'm going to use it all. So hopefully I'm forecasting what those shortfalls are going to be. It is possible we could see a shortfall due to the COVID slowdowns. However, looking at the point of sales from basically Amazon and all the point of sales, our county's still bringing in the revenue right now. So our budget shouldn't be that affected. If given the budget shortfall, that's again where we rent that jail space out and we use those money to help offset the cost of any budget shortfalls. The other idea I have is to take training opportunities and have the sheriff's office be the host of trainings, various trainings for all county leaders, because I want to help the entire county. So we take those trainings and we host, and then it's low cost to us, and it allows the entire department to hopefully get trained and save some money there. And there's all kinds of free training as well. There's LexiPol, they have online training with Gordon Graham and other trainings as well. So any costs I could do to save money, I'll find those ways to trim those costs and save the taxpayers money. And if I'm told I have to save money, we'll find a way to do it, but still provide the best coverage we can to Kittitas County residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheriff Myers, same question. How would you deal with reduced budget?
Well, I've had to deal with a reduced budget on multiple years. And so we've always managed to work within the constraints of our budget, but I can't remember a time that we haven't submitted our budget and then had to reduce it by sometimes up to $1 million. So in the budget process, I present a budget that is, if we could do everything we need to do, this would fund it. Then I have at least 3 alternative budgets in preparation for minor cuts, medium cuts, and major cuts. And we've had to impose all of those at different times, and we've successfully done that. It's not a real simplistic thing. When we talk about sales tax, that's a different budget revenue and different expenditures. The general fund generally comes to property taxes, things of that nature. We also have federal funding that comes in. So we have 3 different revenue and expenditure budgets. When we put together budget reduction plans, we first look at stuff and programs. Our discretionary funding really isn't that big. Most of these are fixed costs, and most of them center around personnel. And so we'll push our cars back for a year out of our rotation. That's generally in the neighborhood of $60,000 to $80,000 a piece. We generally try to not touch training. All of the training things mentioned we already do. We host training, we use online training, and we rent out bed space. The only reason we're not renting out as much bed space right now is because of COVID, and we're trying to keep COVID out of our jail, so we have some restrictions in there. I have, I believe, 10 current contracts with municipalities, state and federal agencies to rent out those bed space. That all brings in money and revenue to our general fund. We can't cross those other funds in there.
I'm muted. Thank you. Your last comment there is a perfect segue into our next question, which is about the jail. The Kittitas County Correction Center is underneath the jurisdiction of the Kittitas County Sheriff's Office. And this year with the pandemic, COVID outbreaks are a serious concern. Do you have a plan for how you would handle that if an outbreak were to get out and infect the inmates and the staff there?
Yes, we do. When COVID, the planning and the impacts of that first started, we were one of the first jails to put forth an approved plan. We met with the stakeholders, we met with public health, and we developed a plan to address each one of those things. We have to work with the other jurisdictions and as well as the courts. We had to put some restrictions in place. We had to change some things up in the jail so that we have a real solid program to keep that COVID out. One of the primary elements of that was only bringing anyone or anything into the facility that absolutely had to be there. We took some of the processes and programs that we normally house in the facility and we moved those off-site. Some of those processes in and of themselves weren't as high a risk, but the location in the facility was. In conjunction with that, we developed procedures to screen people before they came in, quarantine people when they came in, isolate different areas of the jail as for both the inmates and the staff and the services we provide. We set up and brought in technology so that we could do things remotely with the courts or with visitation. And then we set up a response plan for both staff and the inmates should we have an outbreak. We feel pretty strong that the plan has worked. The plan's been vetted. We've worked with other facilities, looked at some of the things they were doing, and worked with our public health official. They've signed off on the plan. We evaluate the plan continuously, and it's working. We have had no cases in our facility.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Olson, if elected sheriff and you were to still be dealing with the possibility of COVID-19 outbreaks, how would you handle that situation?
Well, I would definitely look at the plans that are in place. But prior to that, I would look to the Department of Health, look for their recommendations. I'd make sure that I had plans in place for all the employees to make sure they're safe. And then obviously inmate safety is always going to be concerned. They're our responsibility. And I would talk with the courts, which may or may not have been done, and just find a way that, an alternative way to have people answer up for their charges without necessarily having to be incarcerated at the time until there's a COVID, resolution of some sort, whether it's, a shot, whatever it may be. We need to get that figured out. But I think having those plans in place to prevent an outbreak starts with the employees and making sure they're safe, and then talking to officers in the field, finding ways to avoid having to come to the jail. Then screening the inmates, the offsite facility where prisoner transports and stuff could take place. I think that's a great idea. They don't all need to be out the jail to do that. As long as it can all be done safely for the staff and other agencies and inmates, then that's what I do. It sounds like there's some fairly good plans in place, and I'm not going to fault what's going on. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Another function that the sheriff's office has under its purview is search and rescue. And so, Mr. Olson, do you believe that search and rescue has sufficient funding? And is there any other changes you'd recommend to the current search and rescue program?
Thanks. I think the search and rescue funding can, like any funding, I think it always could be more. We can increase their technology with unmanned aerial vehicles for search and rescue events. And we continue to be a playground for our neighbors to the west, and especially during COVID, all the people come to our heels to play and recreate and get away. And so whatever we could do to increase the funding, I think is always going to be good. And what we need to do, I think also, is we need to increase the amount of volunteers that we have. We do pretty good now. I think we have 70 to 80 volunteers. King County has about 900 volunteers. And I think with a lot of the King County residents coming over here, there's no doubt in my mind we could start to recruit some of them to assist our search and rescue folks here. Let's see what else. Yeah, I just think our search and rescue, we have a good search and rescue program, and it just is going to continue. Their need is going to grow, and moving them to the west, I know that's been talked about in the future. I think that's a great idea because 70 to 80% of the calls are up west. So whatever we can do to facilitate that would make more sense than having all our equipment come from Ellensburg. And what I'd like to see take place as well as far as budget goes. Find a facility up west where we can house all the equipment and also have it be a substation or station for deputies that are working west. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sheriff Myers, same question about search and rescue. What are your thoughts about the funding for the program and the future of the program?
This community is so supportive of search and rescue. When the SAR coordinators come to me and say, we need this piece of equipment and we're doing a fundraiser, it's just short order. They come back and say, yeah, we have the money for it. The big ticket items the sheriff's office has been able to support. We also use some of the military surplus programs, which is great because we can get a lot of that equipment for free. And some of that equipment, you just have to pay a nominal fee usually to get it here. A lot of folks think that we only get, you know, guns and tanks and bayonets and stuff. That's not what we get from the surplus. We get blankets, we get equipment for search and rescue. The taxpayers have already bought that stuff. And so it's a real benefit. I would say that we are underfunded a little bit right now when it comes to capital facilities. I'd started a plan actually a year ago to move, to acquire a facility in the Upper County and to move the operations up there. I briefed the county commissioners and gotten approval to move forward with that, put that plan on the capital facilities projects list. And I've also met with the Upper County mayors to, you know, get their input and buy-in. We want this to be sort of a community-based decision. We're hoping that we can work with them to address, you know, some of their needs as well, some of their expansion needs. And so we think that with partnering with the Upper County resources, with the Upper County municipalities, we're going to be able to do this. I sure wouldn't turn down any money that would help us make that a reality.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, Mr. Olson, you want to rebut that or add something?
No, I just have a few things to add. Something, and I've talked to the search and rescue coordinator, Ron Goins, about this, but I think stationing search and rescue people at trailheads or at the rivers where people are launching their boats, some of those areas where we've had recent drownings or problems in the past couple of years, even on the search and rescue, putting people there to educate the public that are going out into the field, into the river. Just having people there like King County does, they put people at trailheads at certain times, and that might prevent further search and rescue.
Okay, thank you. All right, back to you, Sheriff Myers. What's your position on the use of body-worn cameras by deputies?
Well, I'm in support of it. You know, the technology has come a long way, and as you know, that's been one of the primary topics on police reform across the country. Expectations have changed, and they continue to change, and we have to keep up with that, and we have to lead that. One of the biggest challenges for body-worn cameras has been the expense, not so much the equipment, but the storage. We have the responsibility of maintaining that footage and making it available through public records and public records requests. And if you think about, you know, that's 24/7 on 4 or 5 officers constantly running, and it's a huge storage issue. The technology changes that have come about with cloud storage, it's really getting there where it's going to be more affordable. In fact, I've actually put that in my proposed 2021 budget to outfit our deputies. We're looking at a system, evaluating systems. Right now, we want to link it to the car videos. All of our patrol cars have in-car video systems. So we want to make sure that those things are married and merged together. We believe that the legislature is going to include this in any approved police reform packages and legislation. And with that, we're hoping the fiscal note will allow some funding to help the counties and the municipalities offset those costs. Whether they do or not, irrespective, it's in our budget for next year to get that started.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Olson, same question. What's your take on the use of body-worn cameras in the Kittitas County Sheriff's Office?
Yeah, I definitely would support getting body cameras to the Kittitas County Sheriff's Office, and I definitely believe cameras they just help so much with accountability, and just it builds the trust amongst the public. And I have found that even just having car cameras during my career as a sergeant, it reduced the risk to officers. It gained, there was a compliance factor by some violators with them, and then as far as complaints go, it was just very easy to solve a complaint looking at a camera. And so body worn cameras would be no different than that. There is a problem with storage and the public disclosure requests that come with cameras. They do occupy a ton of time by the staff that has to fill public disclosure requests. And so hopefully something can happen during, if police reform takes place across our state. That'll be one of the things the legislator does address, and find an easier way for the funding of the cameras, the storage of the videos, and then the release of the videos to the public. But I'm definitely a fan of cameras. I think it's good for suspects, the agency, the officers, and it helps everybody. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Actually, one of the other things we need to ask you guys about tonight is the broader concept of police reform. As you know, that's been talked about, and one of the things that's been mentioned is the restricting the purchasing of military surplus vehicles. There's been a number of other proposals out there I'm sure you're both familiar with, but Mr. Olson, your turn to take this question first. What's your take on police reform and how that would apply to the sheriff's office?
Well, police reform, police agencies across the United States are always moving forward and, trying to be better. And I think that's, police reform is going to be one of those things. It's like we're moving forward. In previous years, we've gotten crisis intervention training. That's been just wonderful. It's reduced our uses of force. It's helped officers in the field. So we need to always be moving forward. We need to look at these things. So police reform, you mentioned something about military vehicles and surplus. If it can be used in law enforcement and it can prevent somebody from being, hurt, victimized, prevents officers from being harmed, then the use of military equipment for law enforcement, it's meant to be good. It's meant to protect everybody. Police reform, I think we also need, part of police reform is I think we need to be educating our journalists, our reporters, activists. We need to, law enforcement can do a better job on reforming them as well. And what I mean by that is, I think we need to educate the public and do a better job on the successes that law enforcement have. And we need to involve them in the decision making that law enforcement sometimes has to make in a split second. And so educating these people can help law enforcement in the future. A better informed public, they might not be so quick to pass judgment. So that would be something I would like to see as part of overall reform. And as far as the sheriff's office goes, reform, just continue with some bias training and crisis intervention training, and just try and be the best agency we possibly can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Meyer, same kind of open-ended question. What's your take on police reform, including the proposal to restrict the purchasing of surplus military equipment?
Well, I touched on that a little bit already. The military equipment that we get, we look at emergency management generally first and foremost. And so we get blankets. We've gotten blankets and things for the jail, blankets to assist in shelters. We've gotten cots if we have to set up big shelters. We've got vehicles that are capable of crossing, bodies of water for flooded roads, things of that nature. So again, this stuff's already been paid for by the taxpayers. I think that just shutting that down isn't going to help. It might help some areas, with how things are perceived, but it's going to, it's going to cut off a resource that we have that's actually pretty beneficial. So I really don't support that. Screening things a little bit better, maybe that'll help, but not just turning it off. Police reform is something that is very broad. One of the big issues they talk about is law enforcement doing things that law enforcement isn't equipped to do. Yeah, it couldn't be more true. We're going to come to every call, but we're not surveyors. We're not psychologists. We can't cure drug addiction. We can't cure mental health. But we're always going to show up, and we're always going to try. And so I think internally is where we have the most room. One of the first things I did as sheriff was to change our business model to bring in an individual, a very sharp individual, and his focus is to make sure that we are meeting the needs in a legal and lawful manner. Internal audits, transparency, accountability, and that we're actually showing the community that we're doing things the right way. That's really what it comes down to, is making sure that we're walking the walk. And it's been very successful. It's a program that's working.
Okay, thank you. You talked about mental health, and we've actually got a question from one of our members. So I'm just going to read it verbatim. Across Washington, we're seeing more demand for mental health services. Dealing with people who have mental health needs can present unique challenges for Sheriff's Department personnel. Do you believe the Sheriff's Department is properly equipped and trained to respond to situations where someone is involved who is experiencing a mental health crisis? And if not, how would you improve the department's readiness? And it's your turn, Sheriff Myers, to go first.
Well, the short way around the barn is no. We're not adequately trained for what the expectations are. We continue to increase the training, to increase our knowledge base, to increase our ability to respond to those kind of calls. But the expectations far exceed, I think, the capabilities of law enforcement across our country. At least we're talking about it now. That's been one of the frustrations for law enforcement, is that either society or the legislature puts these additional responsibilities on law enforcement, and we're not equipped to do it. We'll show up and we'll try every time. But mental health is such a complex thing, and it continues to grow. It's influenced by a lot of stuff. So we've ramped up our training, both as an agency and as the state. Criminal Justice Training Center, we put in mandated training. We've hosted training here as well. So I wish there was a magical answer, but just think about mental health issues, okay? And if the mental health professionals working with those individuals, if the family members who know those individuals better than everybody else can't manage that person in crisis and they have to call us, we don't even have the knowledge base that they have. And many times these encounters turn violent, and it's very, very difficult to put you in a pretty tough spot. The best we can generally do is stabilize the situation and try to get these folks the services that they need. Recognizing the type of distress that they're in goes a long ways, and that's what we're focusing on right now, is to train our guys to recognize the different symptoms and the different types of illnesses so that we don't respond in an inappropriate manner.
Thank you very much. Mr. Olson, same question. There was a lot of context at the beginning of it, but basically, is the sheriff's office equipped and trained to handle people who are experiencing a mental health crisis? And if not, what do you think needs to be done to improve the department's readiness?
Well, I think it's a yes and no question. I think the sheriff's office is probably, and deputies and actually all officers across the state are probably the best person to respond to an unknown crisis to start with, because there's so many variables in different crises that law enforcement needs to be able to protect themselves and needs to be able to, protect other people. And so each scenario and each situation is going to be different. I think having a mental health counselor available to help respond to crises, or people in crises, can definitely be helpful. It could possibly reduce law enforcement involvement altogether. I've actually used that before. I've had a person in a mental crisis on the side of I-90, and we were able to have a mental health person from Kittitas County come to the scene and help us resolve the situation. So more access to that would be great, as long as we can protect that mental health counselor coming out and helping. It's just such a, there's so many variables to mental health, and I'm actually with Sheriff Myers on this. I wish it was an easy solve all for this. Our mental health system in our state, I think, is poor. I think we could do a better job. We can reduce our use of forces significantly. We've done that through crisis intervention training required by the state. A continuation on that and just continuing to train our deputies would be a direction of mine. And anything we could do to help a person in crisis and help our officers be safe and help our community be safe, that's a goal of mine.
All right. Shifting gears here a little bit, what's your position on working with federal law enforcement operating in our area, particularly immigrations and customs enforcement? Mr. Olson, you're up first.
Okay. Well, I think we always have an obligation to support our federal partners, as long as it's within the confines of the U.S. Constitution and the state Constitution and laws. So the individual officer in the field, we always need to support them. We need to do what we can to make sure they're safe. All other federal partners, I think we have an obligation. It's law enforcement, and we're about law and order, so we need to make sure we do that. As long as helping out immigration custom enforcement is on criminal matters, I think we have an obligation to continue doing that, and that would be a direction of mine. As long as, again, I would follow through with the legal advice of the prosecutor's office and the state laws to make sure that we're in compliance with that. But I think we have an obligation to help our federal partners out all the time.
Okay, thank you. Sheriff Myers, same question about working with federal law enforcement, particularly immigrations, customs enforcement.
Well, we're statutorily required to work with them, all federal law enforcement agencies. And U.S. Immigration is a federal law enforcement agency. The distinction is where we draw that line is with federal administrative violations. We don't get involved with those. We support whether it's DEA or ATF or FBI or ICE with criminal investigations and with handling prisoners. So I support that, and in fact, I support it to the point that I've authorized federal agents that work in our community, given them police powers to enforce state law. What that does is it ups our interagency cooperation. It puts other bodies out there that can respond to and deal with, whether it's they're on the scene of a domestic violence or a drunk driver. It just puts another person out there. It increases that relationship. All of that equates to better community safety. All of that equates to better interagency cooperation. And when we have emergencies or when we have large scale issues, we know each other. We have relationships in place. Some of these require actual contracts and agreements, which we already have in place with all of these agencies. So I support working with them. It's our job, it's our legal responsibility, but we have to be clear that ends when it comes to administrative laws and administrative violations. We stay out of it.
Okay. All right. We're going to shift gears again to more of a warm and fuzzy question. What type of local projects and community involvement have you participated in? Mr. Myers?
Are we referring to law enforcement related or just community?
Just community in general.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I've been in Rotary for 7 or 8 years, participated in projects there at the animal shelter, repainting it. Just last year we completed a project there building some fencing in the back area for animal exercises so that they can have a little bit more leeway. Let's see. I participate as a director on the rodeo board, also a director on the fair board. I've been involved in volunteer programs for handicapped access, Yakima River cleanup, access to the river, restoration projects with the Department of Natural Resources and the Forest Service. Served on meth action team, sexual assault intervention, served on the accreditation commission with the state. We're pretty involved as a family, and as we're pretty involved in the community. We worked on with Habitat for Humanity on housing projects. Worked with our prosecutor in actually bringing our first sexual assault interview specialist here. Saw the need for that, and that's still just a fantastic program today. So pretty involved.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Olson, same question about local projects and community involvement.
Thank you. So I've been involved with the Kittitas Valley Junior Soccer Association. Was a coach, co-coached with another person, and I'm glad I have that involvement. I've been involved with Shop with a Cop / firefighter since I think about the year. I came here a year after it started, and been involved with every year that I've been in the community. It's a great program. You get to take a lot of kids who are deserving of funds that our community raises, and these kids get to go on shopping adventures, and they get to buy stuff for themselves around Christmas time, buy stuff for themselves and our family. And let's see, last year was involved with the law enforcement torch run, Cops on Top fundraiser. Involved almost all the agencies in the county. We raised funds for that, which is great. Allows the kids to, with the law enforcement torch run, to be able to go to the Special Olympics. Been involved with 4-H. I've been announcing at horse shows, volunteering in other events down there for several years. My wife is a 4-H leader, and so even after my daughter was done with 4-H going to college, I still volunteered with the 4-H events as much as possible. Let's see, helped out with CASA fundraiser, and again, very, very involved. A Rotary member, recent Rotary member, joined last year, and just really care about this community and giving back to it. Going back to the start of my giving back to this community, I started as a reserve officer. So for a year and a half, I was a reserve officer giving back to this wonderful community and great sheriff's office.
Okay, thanks. All right, looking at the clock, I think we have time for one more question for each of you before we do closing statements. So the last question is about training. Obviously, training is very important in law enforcement. Could you please, Mr. Olson, tell us about some of the training that you've had during your career and what your philosophy in general would be about training for your deputies and staff?
Thank you, Steve. So training, very, very important. I think throughout my career, starting as a Taos County Sheriff Reserve, it was approximately 250 hours of training. Going through when I was hired by the Washington State Patrol, actually, let me back that up. After being a reserve, I went to the Corrections Academy. It's a month-long academy. Learned a lot of great skills there, how to interact with people. And then the Washington State Patrol Academy is approximately 1,200 hours of training, just right around 6 months of training, 2 months with a field training trip with another senior trooper. And since then, I've been to Supervisor's Basic, got my accreditation through the state for that mid-level management courses, and I've continued to do leadership training throughout my career as a sergeant, and I continue to train up the deputies. I was a field training officer, and deputies and troopers, and I think it's always important to continually train and be prepared, and it just helps the officer be safe. I think safety is very important. I've stressed safety throughout my career with my detachment. And so we can never do enough as far as training goes. And I think, being college educated, I think that definitely makes a difference in law enforcement. I do find that there's an interaction that can be a little different. So if I can help deputies get some kind of schooling and help them obtain a degree, that would be a goal of mine. And just continual ed to make officers safe, to keep our community safe, that's a goal of mine.
Okay, thanks. Sheriff Myers, could you please tell us a little bit about the training you've had in your career and what your philosophy for deputies and staff is?
Certainly. Let's see. Basic Academy, all of the required training for a patrol deputy, for a Washington State Peace Officer certification. As a supervisor, I have certified career level certification as a supervisor, career level certification as a middle manager, and also the executive level career certification. Basic tactical officer, basic and advanced sniper, tactical command, tactical command college, search and rescue. I believe the first Swiftwater technician, rescue technician, Tech 1 and Tech 2, ice rescue, basic, advanced diving and public safety diving, underwater investigations. I was a detective for 8 years, so criminal investigations, crime scene investigations, interviewing, case management, homicide, sexual assault, crimes against persons, violent crimes, profiling. As a tactical officer, or not as a tactical officer, excuse me, but as a commander, attended and completed command college, leadership courses through WASPIC, all of the administrative budgeting for small agencies, budgeting for law enforcement, managing corrections divisions. I think that, we encourage, we support, we push training. My budget every year continues to be, training is one of our top 3 priorities.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to do closing statements. Sheriff Myers, a reminder, this one's 90 seconds for your closing.
Okay, thank you. it's really been an honor to serve in Kittitas County. I think that we're so fortunate here. We have such community supports. Public safety is one of the top ranked considerations for people when they're looking at moving into a community. We've been able to put together programs that engage with other agencies, engage with our community members and our community partners. And those are the things that just really build public safety. Our job isn't to go out there and manage the public. Our job isn't to go out there and lurk around and catching people make mistakes. We're part of the community. Our job is to help the community and to protect the community. So to that end, I think I'd really like to sort of emphasize that we have a strong policy in the sheriff's office. We continue to push policy so that, you know, we're accountable to the public. We're at times have to hold them accountable. We have to do that internally first. And so one of the things I think I'm the most proud of is that how much effort and emphasis is just simply put on policy and procedures to make sure that we're doing things that the community expects us to do. We respond to 3,000 plus calls a year. And that takes a broad scope. And I see our time's up, so I'm just going to stop there.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Olson, your closing statement, please.
Okay. Well, thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this forum and giving us a chance to speak. And I want to be your next Kittitas County Sheriff. I have been encouraged by many great citizens in this county, many leaders in this county to run for this position. I got my start at the Kittitas County Sheriff's Office, and after my 25-year career with the Washington State Patrol, I believe, and I've seen some decisions made at the Sheriff's Office that I think can be done better. I feel like I am that person that can help the Sheriff's Office grow and be better. You know, 35 years in the department with Sheriff Myers, it's admirable, but I think it's important to have a fresh set of eyes in the department, fresh set of ideas. I look forward to hearing what the employees want to see done differently. Maybe their voices haven't been heard. I will listen to my employees. I will develop my employees. I want to develop my employees to be the next leader of Kittitas County. I want to make sure the mental well-being of my employees is taken care of. That is very true to me, very important. I want my officers to be safe. At the end of the day, every officer better be going home to their family, better be giving them a hug, and they better have that life-family balance between that and work. So I thank everyone for the support up to this point and continuing on, and I look forward to your vote. Thank you.
Well, this is normally the time I'd ask our live audience to give a hand to our two fantastic candidates tonight. Instead, I'll just speak for them. Thank you for your dedication and service to the citizens of Kittitas County. A couple quick reminders to our viewers. Tomorrow, tune in at 6 o'clock for the Chamber's forum featuring our candidates for County Commissioner and the PUD Commissioner. And November 3rd, get your ballots in. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a great night.
Thank you.